Welcome, everyone. Come on in, take a seat. Thank you for joining us. We will get started here shortly, and we'll be going over the state of the residential construction industry 2025 report here with the Association of Professional Builders. If you wouldn't mind, put a note in the comments where you are coming from. And Michael, thanks for commenting on the Wild. It was a great win. It's getting to be crunch time now for hockey, but yeah, it was a great win. Well, hi Kathleen from sunny Ocala, Florida. We were just talking about Orlando and the Builders Show, which is coming back there, by the way. You guys got to come to the Builders Show next year in sunny Orlando. Hi, John. Good to see you. Hi, Eric. Glad you could be here. Well, everyone's filtering in here. I want to introduce Russ, who is our man of the hour here today. Russ is the co-founder of the Association of Professional Builders, coming to us live from the Gold Coast of Australia. So, Russ, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for the invite, Rick. Excited to be here, so thank you.
And just as a heads up, everyone that attends here today, Russ is going to be going over some of the report details. There's 9 different categories in this report. I'll let him give the overview of how the Association of Professional Builders conducts the report, how they gather the information, the different types of builders, et cetera, et cetera. He will be going through the details of that. And then if you do not have a copy of the report yet, his team will be sending one out after the webinar. You will have it. And if you have any other questions for Association of Professional Builders, they will get to you. So Michael, welcome. Glad you could be here. And Michael Wilson says he's going to be in Queensland next week, Russ. So you might have a coffee date there.
Fantastic.
Hi, Joel. Thanks for chiming in. Joel's in Dallas, Fort Worth. And Russ, why don't we kick it off and tell us a little bit about some of the things that you discovered with the annual report?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll start off by just describing what this report is. So it's an industry report where we survey the owners and directors of residential building companies with the help of industry partners such as House, Builder Trend, and of course Builder Lead Converter. We gather data on about 120 different data points and then analyze that data to come up with some real insights as to how the residential construction industry is operating, and some real deep insights into how these residential building companies are being run. And these insights come from all over the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. So we can actually compare the data from different countries and look at the overall picture as well. This year we had 2,200 builders take part in the survey, so there's a lot of data that comes in, and it's the 5th year that we've been running this survey. So what we've been able to do is identify trends in the industry as well. So it's become a very important and I'd say respected report within the industry. Very comprehensive. Just to give people a feel for it, this is the printed version, and if you stay with us till the end, we'll get you a PDF copy out to make sure that you guys can access this information as well.
Russ, you started, I think I remember the first time that once we started our partnership, I think the goal was to get 1,000 builders to respond. And then I think it was 1,500 builders. And then I see that this year you were over 2,200 responses.
Oh, wow. I'd forgotten all about that. But yeah, that makes sense. I mean, when you think back, that was a pretty lofty target, because we do filter out a lot of data that's not related to residential construction. So this is only applicable for builders that are doing new homes or large renovation projects. And we actually separate the data out between new homes and renovations as well, where applicable. But yeah, that was quite a lofty goal to come out in the box for 1,000 responses.
1,000, yeah. And so it goes to show the quality of the data, just because you continue to grow the responses. And so I'm very excited. I know you've got really some 3 key issues, I think, that came away from this year's responses, but you want to start us out with giving us an overview of those 3 things?
Yeah, I think the maybe one of the biggest things that is coming through, especially when you compare the report year on year, it's that builders are becoming more and more systemized every year. And this is what is driving profitable growth. We've seen a massive change in the industry since we started back in 2014. We started in Australia, and builders can be pretty brutal in Australia. And I can remember us doing presentations back in 2014 where we talked about the need for building companies to operate on a 10% net profit margin after drawing a market wage. And we'd have builders fall on the floor laughing in these presentations. They didn't hold back. They told us exactly what they thought. Some builders, some of the older guys who had been entrenched in non-profitable operations for a long time and truly believe that's just the way it is in this industry, couldn't accept what we were saying and actually would get up and walk out mid-presentation saying, this is rubbish, this isn't possible. And what is interesting now in the report is just under half, I forget the number, I think it was like 35% maybe, of builders are now achieving a 10% net profit margin after paying themselves a market wage. But even more exciting, 75% of builders are targeting 10% net in 2025. I mean, that is an extraordinary transformation from where we were 10 years ago, but it shows that a builder's mindsets have changed. But also the ability to hit that 10% net has come from being more and more systemized, because you can't hit that level of profitability working the old school way. You've got to have good marketing systems in place. You've got to have a documented sales funnel, sales process, and your operations have got to be systemized using the latest project management tools and even tools for estimating and takeoff as well. So that's what we have seen. Builders are becoming more systemized. We're seeing less and less use of spreadsheets, and that is what's driving the profitable growth. 2 other things we've seen which maybe aren't as positive, and that is that marketing, and in particular content marketing, that remains a missed opportunity for builders. And really, content marketing is the secret sauce behind signing high margin contracts. So it's kind of good and it's bad. It's bad because not enough builders are doing it, but it's good because it remains a massive opportunity for builders. And then finally, the other big insight, and this isn't kind of anything new because we've seen it in the data for the last few years, financial literacy amongst building company owners remains worryingly low. Builders simply do not have a good grasp of their numbers. Unfortunately, they're not looking at accurate financial information each month. So they were the big 3 highlights, I would say, that certainly I took away from the data this year.
So, and I know you guys deal a lot with at APB with financial literacy, and we talked about it a little bit prior to this, is that unfortunately some of these numbers being reported, it might be garbage in, garbage out. And I know you have a financial section where we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm excited to hear kind of more of the data and your insights there as well. So what do you say? You want to start with sales and kind of go through from there?
Let's dive in. Yeah, excited to dive into the data again. So I guess if we do look at sales, the number one challenge for residential builders in sales is unrealistic client expectations, which kind of surprised us a little bit. And but it's interesting how the problems have changed over the years. And this has now become a big one because builders are becoming more systemized, more sophisticated, but clients are becoming a little bit more educated as well. And as we know, a little bit of knowledge can be dangerous. So I'm sure builders have experienced this, where once the build gets underway, once you get past the framing and lock up, and you start getting into the bits that the client recognizes, all of a sudden they become experts, and then we're talking about things that they thought were included or should have been included, and they turn out they're not included, and it's causing a bit of a problem for builders. But again, this is where education comes into it, because if you find yourself dealing with those problems, the way to fix them is before you get to contract, not after. And that's all about managing client expectations. And interestingly, I actually did a presentation at IBS last year on managing client expectations, and it was one of the most popular presentations there. So I think it really does highlight the demand, the interest from builders in this particular challenge. And there are builders looking for solutions for that. And the good news is there are solutions. The other big one in sales is that more and more builders are now following a documented sales process. So in the most recent survey, we've now got the majority of builders are following a document. I think it was 53%. It was up from about 43, 44% last year. So it's trending in the right direction, and with good reason as well, because the builders that do follow a documented sales process, because we've been able to cross-reference the data, we can see that these guys have an 8% net profit margin versus the guys that don't have a documented process are only achieving 5%. So that's over 50% increase in net profit. Look at your dollar figure for net profit. What would a 50% increase in that look like for you? So you don't have to do any extra work. You get more organized on your front end. That obviously leads to higher conversions, less objections, because this is where a lot of net profit gets eroded. You're trying to sign this contract, trying to get it over the line. All of a sudden they start renegotiating on price because it is higher than they thought it would be. With a systemized documented sales process, you can overcome those objections before they even happen, and that obviously protects your margins. Another interesting trend we've seen is that for the first time ever, more builders are now charging for quotes, which is just fantastic. This is something we've been talking about, as I'm sure you have, Rick, for a long, long time now. Yep. You work for free, you won't be respected. You'll end up in a tender where the losing bid actually wins. By the losing bid, I'm saying the lowest, least profitable bid or quote will actually win the tender, and you don't want to win that race. So great to see the majority of builders now charging for quotes. And probably just on that, I would drop in, like, if you think I can't charge for quotes in my area, you're probably right. The secret is you don't actually charge for the quote. You charge for a package and the quote's in there. So that's something that kind of gets overlooked when we talk about charging for quotes.
And I would ask the people that are attending tell us, are you charging right now for quotes? And I guess the follow-up question on that is, do you have a documented sales process? Maybe you could drop a comment in the chat.
Yeah, let's see if we can hit that 52.9%
result. Very encouraging, though. Very encouraging, because it was like people kind of laughed at you when you first suggested that, right? Well, why don't you charge to give a price? Or like, no, I can't do that because none of my competitors do, was the standard response to it. But now over half of the respondents are charging. That's great news.
Yeah, and if none of your competitors are charging for quotes in your area, what a great opportunity for you to set yourself apart and do things.
Differentiation. That's right. Yeah, John, I see you are charging for quotes. Eric, you said you're not charging for the initial quote. I guess we can work on that. And Kathleen is, what are you charging a package that has the quote in it? Maybe you could expand on that just a touch, Russ.
Yeah, look, there isn't a standard template that or guide that we give our members in terms of this, because we find that although we give an outline of the documented sales process, builders adapt it to their own market, to their own strengths as well. And we got and this will also be linked to your marketing. So we have some builders with a very strong marketing funnel, very strong. They will go straight to a prelim agreement. So once they've engaged the client, their first ask will be for $20,000 or $30,000, which might frighten the life out of some builders, asking for that amount. But that's probably not where you're going to start, because a lot of them will have started with a fee for concepts. And obviously, if you're charging for concepts, it's because you are a D&C company, design and construct, and that's where the margins are. You want to be involved from the design process. If you're simply quoting other people's plans, you're already on the back foot. But again, this is a process. You're not going to go straight to a D&C and charge 30 grand for prelim. So this is a process for you to go through. But what I would say at a high level, you want to be in design and construct. You want to be taking the client right at the beginning. This is why it makes it so easy to charge for quotes. So there's a difference between an estimate and a quote as well, which we have to explain to the client. A lot of clients believe that other builders are doing quotes for free. No, they're not. They're providing an estimate. So this is where content marketing comes into play. We educate the marketplace. We tell them the difference between an estimate and a quote. Now they understand, right, so, where he quoted 650 and, you're talking 800, that's not what I'm going to go to contract on. That's just his estimate, which is obviously an uneducated guess. So, once we provide this info, we become the experts and the authority as well.
The package then really is going to include perhaps doing a site visit to do an evaluation.
Exactly. That's the secret sauce. In everything we build in, we don't tell them we're going to charge them for the quote. We tell them this is the next step, and we give it a nice name. A nice name.
So it's a package. It's a value proposition.
Exactly.
We're going to do this, and we're only charging you for this month.
That's it. Yeah, maybe we got to do a contour survey. We got to do a soil test. All these things you're going to need anyway. We're going to organise all these for you. This is all part of the package. It becomes very hard for a consumer to compare apples with apples when we start bundling stuff and adding value.
The one thing that I would say to that when I was doing sales training is that I always wanted to come off as an advisor, because I knew that my clientele, they had an attorney, they had a doctor, they had an accountant, they had a financial planner, and they understood that they had to pay to get advice. And so what we were doing is we would do exactly what you said, Russ, is that we would say, here's the package. This is the information that we will put together for you. This is the cost. But really the real benefit was I was able to establish a relationship, trust, and value during that process. And if they trusted me as an advisor, they were going to trust me as their builder too.
It's incredible, isn't it? Yeah, we're prescribing. We're listening to them. This is a whole consultative approach, and we're listening to what they need, what their challenges are, what their goals are, what they're looking to get out of this. We listen actively. We ask more questions so that we truly understand. And what we want to know the emotion behind the decision, because people buy on emotion and they justify with logic. So we want to understand the emotional driver behind, but then we don't sell, we prescribe the solution. And there was a book I read some years ago. There was a study done, and it was a tire warehouse, a tire shop. And as an experiment, the guy behind the counter put on a white coat, and they found they were able to increase their margins just by having this white coat, because there's this perception of authority as opposed to
Doctor of tires. I love it. Not sure if Russ is frozen. Can you guys still hear me? Russ froze up on me. Can you still hear or see me? I'm not sure if I'm having internet issues or Russ is.
Oh, we're back. Did I lose you? Or did you lose me?
Yep. Sorry. Yeah, we had a little blip there, but we are back. Okay. Yeah, you're back, Russ. So the other note you had I saw for sales had to do with referrals.
Sorry, Rick, what was that?
The other note you had for on the sales.
Referrals, yeah. Yeah, this has always been kind of a bit of a challenge in the industry because a lot of builders do rely on referrals, and I'm sure with what you do, Rick, you would have heard this. Yeah, you can talk to a builder. It's like, no, I don't need to market. I don't need to advertise because I get referrals because I've been in business a long time. People just come to me. And the problem is, even if you've got an abundance of referrals coming in, you're still leaving money on the table. Now, right now, I think there's over half of builders are still relying on referrals for over half their sales, which is way too high. I mean, really, referrals should be the icing on the cake, the cream on top. And referrals are great. I mean, don't get me wrong. They're typically worth more because they've been recommended by someone. Therefore, the margins, can typically be higher. But what we'd see when we analyze the data and we look at the builders that do heavily rely on referrals, their markups are about 2% lower, which is, equates to 10%. It's about 21% versus 23%. Those guys that are relying on referrals are marking up lower. So what that suggests to me is the demand is lower, which means you're actually chasing the sale. You're compromising your pricing, your margins, and the markup at 21%, even 23% isn't high enough for new construction. You've got to be marking up by 33% if you want to hit that 10% net. So, you're not hitting the kind of margins that you could be hitting. Also, your business is dependent on other people as well. You're not in control. When you use paid advertising, you're in control of your growth because you can just ramp up your advertising when you want to ramp up demand. That allows you to ramp up your revenue, but also your margins as well. So, referrals, reliance is still way too heavy in the industry on referrals.
That's interesting because I would have deduced that it would be the opposite of what you found, is that the markups would be higher from the referrals because it's such a high.
They should be. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think, if we were able to analyze the companies and look at their markup on a referral versus a markup from a paid lead, I would suggest that is the case. It is higher, but because we're just looking at the builders that heavily rely on referrals versus the ones that aren't, they've obviously got lower demand. That's why we're seeing lower margins. I 100% agree. I think we calculated some time ago that typically, and I don't know what you see, but typically what we saw, about 5% more builders could charge when a lead came through as a referral because it was so hot by comparison to a cold lead.
Yeah, absolutely. But it makes a lot of sense in that I got less opportunities. I'm chasing the lead versus picking and choosing the best opportunities and then working with them and then saying no to the wrong one. It is a referral.
Less leads means you compromise, don't you? You end up trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and you shouldn't be signing a contract with this person. There's that voice going on inside your head that funnel isn't full enough, so you do. And then what happens halfway through? I knew it. I should never have lined up that client.
And then you're apologizing to your warranty people and your trades, and everyone has to deal with them. So, well, let's keep moving. That's interesting. So we're going to move into marketing next. So what did you find out there?
I think like I alluded to at the beginning, content marketing is the secret sauce that for builders that sign high margin contracts. And that's because they're educating the marketplace. And what's great is we can talk about this stuff, which we obviously do because we're a coaching company and we encourage builders to actually do this. But seeing the data is what really gives builders the belief that they need to invest the time, because it can be a lot of work. But if you were to do just 2 articles a year, which is not enough, let's be honest, you really want to be knocking out an article a month really to do this properly. But if you were to do just 2 articles a year What we saw, the builders that did this, their gross markup was 26% versus the builders that didn't do any content marketing. They didn't produce a single article. They only had 20%. So clearly shows the extraordinary increase in margin you can achieve by being perceived as the authority, the expert in your marketplace. So really got to get onto this if you want more margin. And it doesn't even have to be time consuming either, because there's so many solutions where you can leverage your time and get this done for you. Obviously you want a bit of input because you want your knowledge coming through the content, but it's so powerful. And building on from that, over half of builders are still not emailing their databases ever.
That just blows me away, by the way. That's dumbfounded how that could even happen here in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, we started working with builders and setting them up with a CRM back in about 2010, I think it was. And I remember a lot of the feedback from builders then. They like, I don't want to keep emailing my people, or they might not be interested. It's fine. Keep emailing them, provide them with information, and if they're not interested, they'll unsubscribe. That's fine. But some people will get very offended if they get an unsubscribe. But that's just part of the marketing game, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean they don't like you. It just means maybe they're not ready right now. They might even come back later. But you've got to be emailing your database. Ideally, you want to be doing it at least weekly, because otherwise they're going to forget about you. And then when you do email them, they're going to get upset and unsubscribe. So the way you can manage that relationship better is by emailing on a consistent basis. But obviously you've got to be a bit smart about the information that you do email them. And this is where your content marketing comes in, because you're going to email them value. Some people might see it online. Other people, you've got to use multiple channels. So this is where email is so important. But the guys that do email, typically 3% higher gross markups again. So it's just another tick in the box. It's another component. And of course, the other component in terms of marketing is Facebook. The larger companies are posting on Facebook weekly. And they are seeing significantly higher revenue and higher gross profit margins as well. So each of these channels is powerful, as we see from the numbers, but really you want to have a strategy, a plan to be doing all three. You want to create content marketing. You want to be, and that means you're writing articles. You want to be emailing your database, and you've got to be active on social as well.
Yeah, so that's I guess a good definition of content is that I'm adding to my website, whether blog posts or additional pages. I'm promoting that through email to my database of unsold leads, or work in process even, and then I'm using organic and paid social to use that as another way to create awareness for our offerings.
Yeah, and let's be honest, organic social is minute. It is tiny. You've no point in putting all this time and energy into creating great content and then just relying on organic. You've got to put money behind it and get it in front of your audience. And that can be tough when you've just spent a lot of money creating this stuff, but that's what you've got to be budgeting from.
What we all know is you don't have to spend a whole lot. So I guess I'm going to differentiate between, like, say, a paid social where you're running a true ad campaign versus boosting a post. I found that you can spend $25-$50 boosting a post, and you can have great engagement from it.
Absolutely. And this is where you'll have different budgets for different stages. So the awareness stage, which you're talking about, is relatively cheap and very highly leveraged. You can get a lot of good content in front of a lot of people, raise awareness of your brand. We do hate saying get your name out there, but I guess that's kind of what it's relating to. But then to your point, the next step is obviously getting people to opt in, which can be more expensive, because that's a lead generation strategy. And then you got your conversion strategy on the back end, where you're just retargeting the people that have opted in.
I guess to summarize what you're saying is the more different channels you have, the more opportunities it creates. The more opportunities it creates, the more you can pick and choose your work. You're not chasing that sale, you shouldn't go after, and you can keep that pipeline full with a nice backlog, so you're not getting to that critical stage.
Yeah, look, it's supply and demand, isn't it? And I know that's 101 in business. We all understand this at a certain level, but rarely do we see it in action in a building company. And really, this is the key to your success. You want to generate more demand than you can physically possibly supply. And that makes some builders feel uncomfortable because they feel like they're letting people down. But in reality, what it means is for every contract that you want to sign, you're going to need to be signing X amount of prelim agreements, because you know what your conversion ratio is, whether it's like 80%, 70%, whatever. But if it's that high, I would suggest it's too high. What we recommend is you want 2 prelim agreements for every contract you want to sign, because some will fall over for finance, some will fall over for other reasons, especially in high-end custom home where the prelim stage can go on for a long while. Yeah, people get divorced in this period of time, unfortunately. Right. So you want to account for that, but you also want to eliminate the people you don't want to build for. And you want to create scarcity and urgency in your pipeline. And that means you want to have more demand than you can physically supply, which means you're going to be telling people, sorry, but the next start date I've got is next year. And that can make some builders feel uncomfortable, and they worry that the client's going to go elsewhere. But invariably they don't, because as human beings, we all desire scarce resources. It's just the way we're wired. So you'll find that clients will wait for the best builders. The builder with a wait list is the builder in demand. Everyone wants that guy.
I'm glad you mentioned that too. And I think, to clarify, if you're doing design build and you're doing projects 100,000 probably and up, maybe even as low as 75, there's no reason why you can't go to a 2-step process, getting some sort of a feasibility deposit, which is going to be a low amount of money, then moving up to more of a professional services agreement, maybe higher amount of money. But just having that, called that tiered system of commitments, it also, not only is it a financial commitment, but it's also an emotional commitment where the client is making that emotional commitment to the builder. They get, I think the biggest advantage again is the exposure to the team and the builder, that the relationships develop, there's trust established, value is seen there. And again, when it comes down to signing that building agreement, it's usually just a formality. It's not that big of a deal. And so I'm glad you said that. So design build, trying to get to those 2 steps. So I know the next category we had here was projects, and you had a few items there as well in your report.
Yeah, look, subcontractor delays are, in terms of the number 1 challenge, subcontractor delays are dropping in the US, which, you'd expect to see in the data. We went through the boom during the COVID boom, and everything was extraordinarily tough. But subcontractor delays in the US still is the number 1 challenge in terms of project management for builders. Something like 27% of builders actually reported that as their number 1 challenge. Interestingly, the second biggest challenge in the US was client selections. About 19% of builders cited that as their number 1 challenge. Now, that's I think that's interesting when you connect that to the sales challenge being unrealistic client expectations. So I think there's a correlation there between expectations and selections, and builders. There's 2 schools of thought here. Some builders have a very slick process, and they insist on all selections being completed before they will sign a contract. Other builders find that too much of a challenge, and they get the contract signed, and a lot of the selections won't be filled in. So that can lead to selections becoming a bit of a headache if you're not getting those decisions made on time, because obviously that can then delay the project. But of course, this is where technology comes into play as well. Tools like Builder Trend and Job Tread, Build Exact, etc. They all help you manage this process better. So this is where you need to be using technology, because if you're doing it the old-fashioned way, then client selections will continue to be a bit of a headache. The other thing we like to see really is post-project audits on every build, because we have to learn from experience, in what we do. And this is the best way of doing it. It's sitting down with your team post-project, doing an audit, having a look at the budgets, what blew out, what come in under budget. Make sure that information's being fed back to the estimator so that future estimates can be adjusted, revised, and become even more accurate. But look at the timeline as well. Set a baseline at the beginning, and then look at the actual timeline versus the baseline. What does that tell you? Now, obviously, we're going to have weather delays in there, which are going to be built into the contract anyway. But we might see other nuggets of information where the painting might have blown out by a week. Was that because they didn't get it done in the time we allocated and initially estimated, or did they let us down? But the thing to understand is that every day that this project blows out by, there is a cost to that. And that cost is typically going to be between about $500 and $800. Obviously it varies building company by building company, because it's your fixed expenses divided by the number of concurrent projects that you're running on a per day basis. So when you calculate that number, it can come as a bit of a shock. But what you need to realize is that number, every day a project extends, that number is adding up, and it's not coming off your revenue. It's not even coming off your gross profit. It's coming off your net profit. That little bit.
That's huge. I've never thought of it that way, but that's really interesting in that it's really opportunity cost then, because you obviously could be bringing on a new project instead of extending your current project, which taps right into your overhead.
That's absolutely spot on. It's that hidden opportunity cost that we don't realize, because we have a finite capacity in our building companies. We can only do X amount of projects at a time, maximum. So every project that is live is using a bit of that capacity. So like you say, it's gonna delay the start of another project, which we might not realize at the time. But that opportunity cost is very real.
Yep. Okay. You had one more note here for the old friends, family, coworker discount.
Yeah, this is a favorite topic of ours. So much so, we decided to bring it into the survey this year, because it's something we've been touching on in a lot of our presentations and talking to builders about. But a lot of builders tend to do these discounted contracts for family and friends, or even staff, under the false belief that it's not really costing them anything. And this comes back down to not fully understanding the effect of your fixed expenses on each and every contract and your capacity. So like we just said, each building company has a finite capacity of jobs that they can run concurrently. So if you take on a project, a contract, maybe for one of your staff, maybe even a supervisor or a project manager, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's family. But when you take that project on, that's one less project that you can manage. Therefore, that cost is real. And that cost is around about 15% of the contract price. That is what the fixed expense ratio comes out for builders. Now, a lot of builders that we talk to, they end up just adding a couple of percent or maybe 5% as a nominal amount, because they think, well, it's family or it's friend, or here's my supervisor, I want to help them out, I'm not going to make any money out of it, so I'll just do a nominal amount just to cover a bit of expenses. What they don't realize is that their break-even point is actually 15%, not 5%. Sure. So they're subsidizing that build by 10%. And it gets worse as well, because even at that discounted price, the person on the client never really appreciates it. I mean, family and friends, they have no idea, do they, if they're not in the industry, how much it really costs to build. And you've signed a contract at $750 with them instead of $825. They don't appreciate that the real value is $825. They just think, well, I'm helping a friend out because he's a builder, and he's charging me full price. They really don't see it, and they always end up a bit disgruntled. They want a bit more. They feel like you're ripping them off. You're frustrated because you're not making any money out of it. But the real issue is you're actually paying 10% out your own pocket to build their house. So that is painful. So whenever we talk to builders about this, they're always like, I've done it. I'm never doing it again. That's a common thread we hear. So we thought we'd ask how many builders have signed a discounted contract for family and friends in the last year. Over a third of builders have actually done that in the last year. And the fact is, the vast majority of those are running at a loss. So if you've done this, maybe you've got one on the go at the moment, and you've just realized you're actually funding it out your own pocket. Unfortunately, all you can do now is suck it up, put on a smile, and never do it again.
That's right. Learn from it. All right. Well, we got to bring it home here. We got 5 more categories to go. We're gonna move into technology. What did you find out there?
Well, spreadsheets are continuing to decline in popularity, thank goodness, because we all know the stats on the amount of errors inside spreadsheets. I think it's like 95% or something crazy. So why would you use a spreadsheet for your estimate with those kind of stats? So good to see spreadsheets on the decline. And that's across takeoff software, project management software, estimating software. So specialized software is on the up. It continues to grow. But the elephant in the room here when we talk about tech is AI, isn't it? And AI adoption is growing fast. 38% of builders are now using, well, they were at the back end of last year. It's obviously even higher now, but 38% of builders at the back end of last year were using AI within their building companies, and they're using it across multiple areas as well. Marketing is naturally the most common one, but communication, they're using it in the construction process, they're using it in the design process. In fact, probably a lot more builders are now using AI than even realize they're using it, because the platforms they're using are integrating AI. So by default, they're actually they're using AI there. But it's a fantastic tool. Email is probably quite an exciting one that we've seen, because obviously it can get quite frustrating dealing with prospects as you get them to contract and they kind of drop out, or even clients that have unrealistic expectations, and using AI to convey what we're trying to say to the client in a balanced and empathetic way. It saves us going down a path that maybe we shouldn't go down in the heat of the moment, but it's very hard on email. We can get quite frustrated. So it's been a great tool for our members to actually say what they want to say, run it through ChatGPT, and then send the cleaned up version to the client. It is so much more productive.
I want to jump to a hot button one here. I know for you guys is financials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is where we start. A lot of builders come to us because they want more revenue, which means they want more sales. So they need more leads. So that's pretty much where they start off. But once we start working with them, we always start with their financials, because we know that 9 out of 10 of these builders are looking at incorrect financial information, and that's been backed up by the stats. 50% of builders believe they understand how to calculate work in progress, and that is a key component. If you do not have a work in progress adjustment in your accounts each month, your accounts aren't accurate. So 50% of builders obviously aren't doing that, and they know their accounts are wrong. So at least those guys know what they don't know, or they know what they don't know. But the worry is the 50% that say they know how to calculate work in progress, because we then tested those guys with another question, which actually determined if they truly knew how to do this calculation or not. And it's a very misunderstood calculation as well. 95% of accountants don't understand how to do it for a construction company because the terminology is used for a different calculation, so it confuses accountants as well. But yeah, it was 80% of the builders that said they knew how to calculate work in progress actually got it wrong. So what that means is really only 11% of builders truly know how to calculate work in progress. That means only 11% of builders are looking at accurate financial reports. It's scary, absolutely scary. And what happens is this is one of the first things we go through when we train builders. We get this calculation right. And then they put this calculation into their accounts and it destroys their balance sheet. Some builders refuse to believe it. That cannot be right. I don't accept it because they got this money in the bank account and they just can't believe that all the equity they thought they built up in their company is no longer there. So they refuse to believe it. The ones that come to the table quicker are the ones that are struggling with cash flow. They can't understand where the money's gone. They look like they're profitable in their accounts, but they don't even have the money to pay their tax at the end of the year. And sheer frustration when we show them what is actually happening, show them the true picture, the light bulb goes off and now they understand. I mean, the other guys come to the table eventually. Sometimes it can take a couple of years, before they get to that point. And then, I need to understand this. But once they do understand it, most importantly, it leads to a change in mindset, because when you believe you're profitable because you got cash in the bank, and new construction is cash flow positive, which is why you end up with cash in the bank, there's no incentive to change. But when things start to get tough and you know there's something wrong, you just can't put your finger on it. When someone shows you the answer, what happens is these builders actually get angry because they feel that they've been doing all these work, all these contracts and not making a cent. And in terms of family and friends, where they've been doing them for 5%, they've actually been subsidizing the builds. They get so angry and frustrated. That then leads to a determination to do things better. And that's when we then show them how to price their jobs by factoring in their fixed expenses. So now they know what they really need to mark up their jobs by, which is way higher than they've ever marked them up before, which then leads to the third epiphany. Well, how do I do that? And of course, as you know, it's supply and demand. It's by getting your marketing firing and having a documented sales process. So, we want the end result, but we have to take them through the journey, which all starts with financials.
Absolutely. And I just had this conversation today with another builder, and I said, hey, don't even think about going on some sort of a marketing campaign to drive leads and sales if you don't know your numbers. You got to get your processes or your numbers down first. Otherwise, you're just digging yourself a deeper hole.
Yeah, because how much do you know? Like, how much can you even spend to acquire a lead? If you don't know your conversion numbers, you don't know how much a lead is even worth to you. So what do you spend to acquire them?
Yep, exactly. All right, so we have about 11 minutes left. We've got, you have one more note here in financials, and then we got 3 more categories, your planning, team, and training. So I guess I'll leave it to you as what you think we should emphasize.
Yeah, look, when we do these presentations, one thing we always get builders to do is calculate their hourly rate. And we ask them, when you compare that to your staff and your subcontractors, do you feel you're paying yourself what you're worth? And very, very rare we find a builder that says, yes, I'm paying myself what I'm worth. But even those guys are then they're not getting the net profit on the back end as a shareholder, because as a builder, or the owner of a building company, you get paid twice. You get paid once as the owner and as the director of the company. All the risk you're taking, the time you're putting in, you get paid for that. But then as a shareholder, you get paid again. That's your passive income. So some guys, very, very few, I might add, are paying themselves what they're worth, but they're not getting the net profit on the back end. But as a guideline, we see that the builders that pay themselves over $90 an hour, they achieve an 8% net profit margin. So not quite the benchmark that we're looking for, but it's a lot closer than the guys that are underpaying themselves, because the guys that are only paying themselves $60 an hour, they're only drawing 4%. Now, you would think it would be the opposite, wouldn't you? You'd think, well, some guys like to sacrifice their salary to boost their net profit, or take their salary as net profit as a dividend. Yeah, that's kind of how their accountant advises them to do it. I would say, don't do that. I mean, if you really want to do it, do some journals so it still comes out your fixed expenses. But whenever you follow this path of manipulating your market salary to boost your net profit, it always leads to leaving money on the table, because you never mark up your jobs as much as you should. So I guess the lesson here, you've got to pay yourself what you're worth. You've got to know what the market salary is and pay yourself what you're worth. Pay yourself first, and then focus on getting that net profit up to double digit as well.
So I guess I'm going to put a note out there. If you guys have questions for Russ, we have a couple more categories to go here. If you have questions, type them in the chat right now. And if you found anything beneficial, please share it with everyone else on the webinar as well. So Russ, we have planning, team, and training left to go here. So what would you like to hit?
Let's go with planning. I think, let's go with planning. Now, in terms of planning, the big stat that came out was that only about a third of builders have got a 3-year business plan in place. And if you don't have a plan, you don't really know the direction that you're heading. And really, if you don't have a plan, any goal will do. So in business, we have to have a North Star. We have to have something we're moving towards, so that we know what needs to be done on a day-to-day basis. It's been proven. There's been so many scientific studies, and I think the data in the survey backs it up as well, because what we saw was, of those builders that do have a business plan, on average, these guys have a 7% net profit, but the guys that don't have a business plan only have 5%. So that's almost, what is it? It's about a 40-odd% lift by having a business plan. So, you don't even have to hit your business plan. You just got to have it, and you've got a 40% lift in net profit. I mean, obviously, the benefits of having a business plan is it helps you to identify, well, this is where we want to be. This is where we are now. What needs to happen for us to get there? So you start identifying the rocks, the things you need to be working on. You identify the challenges that need to be overcome. So it gets you working on your building company. So if you want to grow, you've got to have a plan. It's so important, and really not enough builders are spending enough time working on their business. About 13% of the time is spent working on the business. Interestingly, there was a difference in country here. Canadian builders are leading the way.
I saw that. There you go, John. Did you hear that? You guys are there. Your Canadian leads here was 20%. I saw
20%. Yeah. I mean, that's nice. I do like the 80-20 ratio. Obviously, we'd like them to eventually spend 80% of their time working on the business. That would be even better. But good to see the Canadians lead the way. Unfortunately, ANZ, Australia, and New Zealand, they're trailing at 10%. So we got the US kind of sat in the middle there. But in addition to a business plan, the other thing that really would help builders is having an organizational chart. And slightly over half, about 50% of builders do have an organizational chart. But the ones that do, they spend twice as much of their time on strategy, on working on their business as those that don't. So, it is a very important component, because when you create a plan, you then want the org chart with all the positions filled in. They might have your name against a load of them to start with, but you've got this North Star again. You know that the positions you want to start filling. Get rid of those things you hate doing. Make your life more enjoyable.
Yeah, that's so true. Interesting, very interesting. Okay, so team, you had some interesting stats on team as well, as far as size of a staff versus the volume of work produced.
Yeah. The average staff size of the building companies that took part in the survey is just over 5 employees. Now, obviously, some companies employ a lot of subcontractors, but these are actual employees. But the companies generating like 10 million plus in annual revenue, they're generating about 1.76 million per employee. So it's quite an important number to understand, because this is about productivity. So obviously, as you get bigger, you become a lot more efficient. But the companies that are doing $3 million a year or less, they're only generating $370,000 per employee. So I think that really does highlight the economies of scale here. But one thing that really stood out as well is that only 27% of building companies have got a documented process for recruitment. Now, we can see quite clearly in the sales process how important this documented process is, and recruitment should be no different. You need your marketing on point to attract the best people, but you then need your recruitment process, aka your sales process. That's got to be a repeatable, documented process, because as the owner of a residential building company, your job is to both attract, recruit, and retain A players. That's what's going to move the dial in your building company. So you've got to have this all nutted out. And company employee handbooks is another component of that. And it does lead to more profitable companies. We found that the builders that have got a employee handbook, they reported 7% net profit margins, versus those that didn't, only 4.5%. So again, that's about a 50% bump there by having this important component. And it makes sense, because if your employees are very clear on what they've got to do, there's less mistakes, and mistakes cost a lot of money.
Yeah, right. So real quickly here, because we're about at the end of our time, you had a couple of notes on training.
Yeah, look, at a very high level, we looked at the building companies that invest money in training, and those guys were reporting 6% net, and the ones that didn't invest in training at all, just 1% net. Again, it just highlights that mistakes cost money. So it can feel painful spending money and time, of course, as well. I look at we have a monthly team meeting. I look at all the staff on that team meeting and calculate the hourly rates and how much this expense.
Don't do that.
Yeah, but it's an investment, not an expense. So yeah, you got to look at it that way. Books. One thing I'll probably, the final stat I'll leave everyone on, which is books. Now, the builders that read just one book a year or more, hitting 6.5% net profit. The guys that don't read a single book a year in the last year, 1% net profit. Again, education, the more you learn, the more you earn. Yeah, that's what I'd like to say. And if you're only going to read one book this year, make sure it's Professional Builders Secrets, because 1% up to 6.5%. The data shows it.
The shameless plug at the end. Russ, has been so enjoyable hearing all the wisdom that's wrapped up in this report. So a couple of takeaways here. You will share the report with everyone that attended here. Everyone will be getting an email with a copy of that report. Joel, you made a nice comment here too. I've never thought of it this way. Joel said the company is its own entity and needs to be paid. This is what the net profit is for. That's great. I love that mentality. You're right. It is its own entity for sure.
And you get paid for each one.
Yeah, and I would also say this too. Contractor staffing source. I think you work with them. We work with them as well. Paul made a comment too on recruiting. His philosophy is you always are recruiting, because that next hire, you don't know when he's ready to quit his job. And if you don't have an ad out there to try to find him or her to bring them on, they'll never know, of the opportunity. So always to have that always be recruiting mentality is really where you find those unicorns and those great producers where you can do these things you're talking about here.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, Russ, it's been an absolute pleasure again. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us. And again, for those of you attending here, you will get a copy of this PDF, and check out Association of Professional Builders. Buy the book, right, Russ? And you can find it on your website, I believe. Thanks so much, everybody, for attending here with us. And for those of you that are clients, for Building Lead Converter clients, Russ is going to be with us next week for a live Q&A where you can have a little bit more intimate conversation with him as well. All right, everyone. God bless. We'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.